Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sunday's Coming podcast. I am here with my co-host, Caleb.
Hello.
He's with a K, I'm with a C.
That's right.
Don't get it confused. And we are here today with Becky Ykema.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for being
here. Taking some time out of your busy weekend while you're here in Chicago to come and hang with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you're not
So
from
good.
Chicago, right?
Well,
you
I
are.
am.
But now you're based
Don't
in.
get it wrong, Caleb.
I'm sorry. You are from Chicago. You're
yes, I am born and raised, but moved out to Denver about 9 years ago.
So let's put it head to head. Like,
Yeah.
if you had to kind of battle it out, which one wins on food scene? Which one wins on weather?
Yeah.
Let's start with that.
This
Okay,
is
go.
super easy. I mean, every time we watch, my husband and I sit down to watch The Bear, I am just in tears during the intro because I'm like, I miss you.
Yes.
So, I mean, food scene, of course, Chicago. There's no comparison, just the best of the best. And then weather, Denver, clearly.
Nice.
I mean,
Okay.
I got to tell you, like the winters out there, yeah, they're incredible because it'll snow, it'll dump, and then like a day later it melts because you're a mile high
Yes.
closer to the sun. So
It's crazy.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Is that good though? Like, do you guys ski
Yeah.
or snowboard or anything like that?
We don't. We maybe should, but it's an expensive sport, and we have
That's
two
true.
littles, so we're like, maybe no. Let's just like roll around in the snow a little bit.
That is
and
more
that's great.
affordable.
It is insanely
Yeah.
expensive.
Uh-huh.
I grew up like skiing and snowboarding in the Midwest. And so
Yeah.
the first time I ever went out west for us. And
Is it like Iowa or where'd you go?
it was Colorado. But the first time, and I like touched like real powder for the first time. I'm like, this is very easy compared to the ice that we snowboard and ski on all winter and what I did all grown up and stuff like that.
Like
But-
Alpine Valley, probably
Oh,
just
yeah.
Yes,
ice.
it is.
Love
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
yes.
I love Alpine Valley
yeah,
so much. So
I've
good.
not been there in a very long time.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day that I want to go back out, but at my age now, it's all about risk management.
I know.
And my risk
Yeah.
management tolerance is quite low of what I'm willing to put myself through and or potentially get hurt in. And I just don't want to do that. I tore my ACL and MCL when I was 18, and it was a fun day.
Getting old.
Yeah. So anyways,
Yeah.
Denver, the weather is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And you came on a pretty nice weekend here. It was quite warm.
I know. I think God was very kind to me because I had a lot of driving to do. But it is just beautiful and sunny and like 45 degrees. It's great.
Yeah, it doesn't. Last week was not the case. It was very, very cold. But glad you're here.
Thank you.
So we'll kind of start back in Chicago because you were here for so long.
Yeah.
You guys knew each other when you were both on staff at the same church.
Yeah, overlapped
different,
briefly.
We did.
locations. But tell us a little bit about like your kind of ministry history and where you were at, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go from there.
Love it. That's great. Yeah. So I grew up in a very small church in Northbrook, Illinois, and really cut my teeth there. Learned how
Can I
to
ask which
sing.
church?
Sure. Northbrook Covenant
I know exactly
Church
where it's
on
at.
Techney and Fingston.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live semi-close.
I live right there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Very
yeah.
close.
Yeah, great church. It was the type of church, felt like family where you could be given a microphone at 4 years old and thrown up on a stage and could totally like biff it and still everybody would clap and support you.
awesome.
So it was the perfect place to kind of learn how to get comfortable on a stage and sing and then play guitar and stretch those muscles. So I did that. I went to school and learned kind of how to be a worship leader, and I did a bunch of singer-songwriter work in Chicago for a while, and then eventually found my way out at Willow Creek Community Church at the mothership.
Yeah.
So there's many campuses. I was there on staff for just about 7 years. So incredible opportunity. I mean, when I started on staff there, I remember they kind of took my guitar away. They said, we just want you to sing. So I'm holding a mic and I'm like,
What do I do?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
What do I,
Like
yeah,
Will Ferrell and Talladega Nights.
100%. What do I do with these? Yeah. So like, God bless them for taking a risk on me too and like teaching me the
Yeah.
way. But yeah, that's kind of where my journey was in Chicago. And
That's
then,
awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
So you were technically like worship staff at Willow then. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And I like calling it the mothership because it truly is the mothership.
It kind
It's
of
very
feels
large.
like it, and it kind of looks like a mall or a big spaceship. You know, it kind of has that feel to it.
definitely
So,
does.
yeah.
That's so funny. And just down the street from Lucky Monk, which by the way, I was thinking about, as I was thinking about you coming in today, I had seen, I was there maybe last fall or something like that at a lunch with some people. And I'm like, I think that's Becky walking through, but it was like a random like Thursday or something like that. I'm like, no, she lives in Denver. And I think I texted you. I was like, are you in Chicago? You're like, I just left Lucky Monk. I was like, I'm eating right now.
Yes, it's such a small world. I love when that stuff happens. Yeah, I'm a part of these. There's a group called Pastors, Priests, and Guides, and they do. They host retreats like roughly 3 times a year, and it's just for anybody who's like a spiritual director, a guide, a pastor, someone who's like ministering and pouring out. And so we had done one of those in Barrington, and we stopped at Lucky Monk on the way to the airport. And here I get a text from you.
It's a great place to have a nice lunch.
It's great.
Amazing.
And maybe a brew.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
100%.
great. Yeah.
I just think of the only thing I can ever think of, if you haven't had their giant pretzel, it's like, it is giant. Like my wife, every time I'm there, typically, you know, unfortunately not with her because I'm there for work or whatever, she's like, please bring me home a pretzel. Yeah. I need to bring one home.
Bring an entire pretzel. They give it to you in a box, like a pizza box?
No, I've never done it.
You've never done it?
No, she asks every time.
Oh, dude.
It's probably terrible.
It's
Pretzel to go.
Mother's Day.
What are you doing on the way home today? Just call ahead and pick it up on your way home.
Yeah.
Extra cheese.
Yep.
That's great.
Cassie, if you're listening to this and Caleb didn't bring you a pretzel today, you'll know he neglected my advice.
Sorry. Comment on this episode. But
Pretzel.
anyways, okay, so you were at Willow for 7 years. That's a long time.
It is, yeah.
And then you left.
I did.
And it was a big jump out of there going to another church.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had felt, let's see here. When I was at Willow, I kind of had to sit in this specialist hat space. Like, there's one job we have for you to do. We want you to do that job. Like, you have to do that
And it's
really,
not
really
playing
well.
guitar.
It was not playing guitar
only
for most
singing.
Sometimes I snuck it in there. Yeah. But it was essentially like, we need you, towards the end of my time there, it was, we need you to be the main female vocalist who can really deliver and emote in a way that like, quote unquote, moves the room. That was a big phrase. Did you ever hear that?
Yes.
Move the room.
Move that room.
Yeah, move that room. It's a big room to move. Can we talk about that? Yeah. So anyway, I knew I'd been feeling in my spirit, like, God, I feel like you've made me to be a worship leader or a worship pastor. At that point, I had gotten my Master's of Divinity, and I was ready. I was ready for that, but that opportunity wasn't going to be where I was. So I prayed for a good long while, like, Lord, where is it? What is it? He wrote very distinctly on my heart one time during a Christmas tech run. We were all like dressed up in our garb. We were stopped for some reason on stage, and clearly the Lord wrote on my heart. He said, enjoy this. This is your last Christmas. And it's one of those few moments when you hear like that audible voice of God. It's so kind because it taught me that he heard me and he had been preparing something else. There was another adventure outside of the mothership. So from there, I jumped over to a great church in kind of outside of Boulder, Colorado. And it was a church startup. We were meeting in a Sam's Club warehouse. Like, all of our walls were curtains.
Yeah.
You know?
Sam's Clubs are large.
They're massive.
Yeah.
So it was freezing because we wouldn't keep the heat on. So I got used to like leading worship with fingerless gloves.
Oh, man.
I mean, like, you talk about that difference going from like specialist where you're seeing 21,000 people come through on a weekend to a church of 400 to 500, cold, one service, all volunteers, stewarding what you have. I mean, it was wild, but I'm so grateful for that
That's
chance.
so funny.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, I think even just maybe in the last like 5 years that have made that shift, like coming from a very large mega church where I think so many roles in large churches. I don't know what the actual size is, but let's say anything over 3,000-4,000 people. You start hiring for specialist roles, and you go, "This is your thing. Stay in your lane."
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it was starting off as a TD, as a tech director, and then eventually having people under me who only did that specialist. You're only audio, only video, only lighting, whatever. And then eventually going, "Hey, at what point do you leave and go to like be the person who does all of it now and is a Swiss
Yeah.
Army knife again when you only had one tool in your pocket to use before. So that is super interesting. How was that transition for you coming from that to all of the things? Because your like megaship experience.
Yeah.
Is
the megaship. That's a good combination of words. It was a megaship.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, like I guess how was that transition, kind of going from that?
Yeah. I mean, it was super eye-opening because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So, and quite honestly, the lead pastors, it was co-lead pastors who had started this church. They too didn't quite know what they didn't know. So we were all sort of learning together. So a lot of trial and error, a lot of asking for grace, a lot of trying things and then learning from it. But I think all of that helped make me the leader I am today. And it gave me a good sense of awareness for the load that everybody's carrying.
Sure.
Like when I started my job out there, I didn't realize that they also sort of expected me to be the technical director at the same time. There were 2 high school students who were like 8-10 hours a week, right? Just helping out here and there and didn't really know the systems that were in place. And they thought that I could be both like tech director and the worship pastor.
Of course.
Clearly.
Why could you not? And communications maybe, who can say?
Yeah, like you could be 2 places at once on a Sunday, sure. So that began my like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't ask all the questions that I should have in the interview process because I didn't know. And they didn't know to ask me if I'm okay carrying that load. Yeah.
Asking the right questions in interviews is we could spend a whole episode just talking about that because I've joked with people like, if I were interviewing at a church today, the questions that I would ask are severely different than the things that I asked in every other job interview that I, had at a church. And I think I don't know if that's just like doing it more or whatever it is, but everybody starts in that spot where you just go, oh shoot, I didn't realize that we should ask. Oh, can you cover this from a technical standpoint? Because you're going to be on the platform leading, and there's going to be somebody back there making sure that it's all working, but you're going to be on stage, and it's if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting concept.
And I'm curious too, that's sort of a practical hands-on question, but I imagine that as you stepped into that role, there are more sort of like leadership, soft skills, sort of another side to the tool set that you needed to bring to the role.
Yeah.
That being the one person kind of, that was point for everything, had to kind of draw out. So like what were some of the leadership or interpersonal things that you found stretching you coming out of that larger context?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think about being in the megaship. Let's call it that. I love it. There was a lot of safety and security and like just kind of knowing what my job was and doing it well. I didn't have to navigate too many difficult conversations or casting vision. But when I was the worship pastor at this church in Colorado, 100%, I was the one who was having to set forward a ministry framework. Like, here's what we're about. Here's what we stand for. Here's what I expect. Here's where we're going to have a hard conversation. And to be the one then who is having to stretch those muscles in real time of like leading through crucial conversations was a brand new, very difficult skill for one who was like a groomed people pleaser. So, yeah.
How did you work on that skill? What were some of the steps that you took to kind of, because here's the thing, whether or not people listening have found themselves in a megachurch context, a middle-sized church, like even in a small church context, you can go years avoiding those crucial conversations. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you did intentionally to get better at that skill?
Yeah. 100%. I just want to acknowledge that. You can definitely avoid those conversations. And I would venture to say your ministry suffers because of it. And it gets capped because you are not willing to be brave enough and vulnerable and walk into those conversations and make the decisions. One of the things definitely was just having to do it. And getting my body and emotions used to that feeling of like, hey, we're going to enter into something and this person's probably going to leave disappointed in you. And then my taking that to Jesus and being like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, I love you. That was hard. I see you in that.
Yeah.
Another thing, I read through Crucial Conversations, that book, and phenomenal. I think I listened to it then 3 times.
Yep.
I went and invested in the masterclass certificate for myself because
awesome.
it mattered so much. So can't recommend that book more highly.
Yeah.
It really helps walk you through step by step how to cultivate like a healthy, crucial conversation, and hopefully walk out with at least alignment with the person. We know where we're landing and we're agreed upon that.
Yeah. I think, we've had a lot of guests on the podcast that we've talked about and how easy it is to beat around the bush in conversations, especially like when you're in a volunteer-led culture, because they're trying their hardest.
Yeah.
We had Sarah Emerson on a couple of episodes ago, and she was talking about like, what if your best isn't good enough, for some of these volunteers or for your staff or whatever that looks like. And being able to have those like hard conversations when I'm sure you had some of those at Willow too, but it's a different kind because they're not all volunteers. They're mostly staff that are coming in. And
I would say this though. One of the things in that time, we had a volunteer like vocal ministry. I'd say that it was kind of made up of some contractors, some staffers, some volunteers. And I remember a few times there were folks who leadership decided they didn't want to see on stage anymore for this reason or that reason. And so we were essentially told to just stop booking that person, but to never have the conversation with them. And I remember sitting with team members who were like, I just don't understand why I'm not being asked anymore. And I didn't feel like I had the authority to tell them why. Yeah. And that deeply hurt me. So that's one of, I'd say, the how not to's I learned in my time there, that person deserves an answer. Otherwise, they just are left confused and feeling uninvited. Yeah. So I'd rather, have the conversation.
And even if, again, there's lots of different reasons that might lead to that point.
Sure.
But even if the right next step for them isn't, having a certain role in a service. Yeah. They may still want to invest in growing that skill. And if you never explain, hey, here's some things you could improve upon, or that here's a fit that would be good for you. Like, there's not a service being done to them to help them take the next step and feel like they can improve their skills or whatever that needs to look like. So that's tough.
That takes me to something. I remember Darlene Check at one of the worship conferences at Willow. She spoke about the process of like, how do you let somebody go from an audition if they're just not quite ready? And she answered it so well, saying like, we have a stewardship to still help that person. Like one, we have to be honest with them. Let's not lie to their face, put them on the team and mute them in the house. Yep. Let's actually have a conversation with them. And it means they've been gifted in another way. So we have a stewardship then to help them find what that is. Like maybe it's the gift of hospitality or something else where they actually have a meaningful way to like bless the church they're a part of, but it's not the worship ministry. Yeah.
Well, I think in those moments too, like you might, it doesn't mean that there couldn't be a hospitality that they could serve the worship team, whether that's, hey, we still have to eat breakfast on Sunday mornings as we're rehearsing, whatever that looks like. Can you help us, in that way? Because I think too often people, when they do have those conversations, there's no, but you could also do this.
Right.
And let me actually like set you up for that. Or, hey, if it's not serving in hospitality on my team, it's hey, let me introduce you to the person who runs guest experience. And, they would love, I know they're looking for people or whatever that looks like. And I think that doing that also makes those conversations easier because it doesn't feel like you're leaving them with nothing.
Yeah, it's not like, we're done here.
Totally.
And like you said too, Caleb, like maybe that person isn't quite ready, but you can give them like this isn't a no, this is a not yet. Right. I want to see X, Y, Z in your growth. And then if that person is truly motivated, they're going to do it. They're going to step up and you can check back in a few months. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you were, how long were you at the church again?
Well, 5 years. 5 years, yeah.
That's a long time too.
Yeah, yeah.
So what did like your transition out of ministry look like? Because I had met you, gosh, when did I meet you? 21 maybe? And you were still on staff there, and then transitioned off semi-recently, right?
Yeah. I transitioned out of ministry there around 2021, around Easter, I think a few weeks after Easter.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had also been on team with Slingshot Group for a couple years at that point too. And just, I really felt like it was time for me to take a break, take a breather. Sometimes we need a little breather from ministry. I don't know.
Yep, we
Anybody?
all
Can we get an amen?
Yeah, have done that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And that was good and right. And it felt right. I had peace about it. Had felt like I'd helped see the change, see the goals, see the development happen that I had wanted to in the ministry there. And then just attended church for a while. If I can be totally honest, that break, like when you're addicted to ministry work, I think I filled my calendar almost every Sunday that first year with contract leading.
Yeah.
And then it was like, no, that wasn't it. So meanwhile, I found a really beautiful home at a church called Denver Community Church in the heart of the city. That was a few miles from where we lived. And that has ended up being a beautiful place where I get to lead there once a month.
That's awesome.
And then just like be a human, take my kids to church on a Sunday. Like we can duck out early if my kids want to. It's okay. Yeah.
That's so
I'm curious, looking back at your transition from the startup church that you were with for 5 years out, like being a part of, church plants and kind of like, there's a lot of investment and sort of, you're just very involved in that community and there's a lot of memories there. Like, what was it like for you to transition well out of that into something else, to kind of pass that baton? And, you mentioned that you kind of got them to a certain place and built some culture.
Yes.
But whether it's a startup, and I think even in other ministry contexts, there's always that challenge of moving on. And what does it look like to set up that team well? So what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Glad you asked. So I gave my church 4 months notice, because this is what I do. I'm a loyalist. I didn't want to leave them in a lurch. And I thought within 4 months, certainly I would be able to bring forward to them my replacement.
Sure.
So in that time, I presented, I think 3 or 4 leaders in the area that were very qualified. Hey, like, let's set you all up to have conversations. And none of them panned out for one reason or another. And I felt deeply responsible and guilty that I hadn't been able to pass that baton like I wanted to. The church ended up going roughly a year in contract leading until they landed on somebody who I had long time since kind of made a connection to them with. And that leader is thriving there. She's done a great job with their team. But that was hard. That was hard to then give it over to God and say, I wanted to be able to make this baton pass. But maybe there's some lesson for myself. Maybe there's some lesson for the church in here, some formation you're doing that has made this not smooth.
Yeah.
So
as a fellow Enneagram 6 and the other loyalist, I get the wanting to like give them a ton of heads up.
Yeah.
Did that feel too long? That's a very long time.
It's a very long time.
That's an incredibly long time. And I think in the moment,
would you choose that time frame again?
Would you do that again?
To
Because
do
that does feel, I don't know. I don't know if that added to your feeling of responsibility to like feel like you could pass a baton in that amount of time. But if it didn't work, then you're like, oh crap, I'm still leaving. And, I don't know.
Totally, 100%. Like when I'm interviewing candidates these days, worship leaders, and they tell me, I gave my 2 weeks notice. And I'm like, you only gave them 2 weeks? Something in my spirit is like, no.
Yes.
I think looking back, had I known that we weren't actually going to be able to land my replacement, I perhaps would have made that 2 months instead of 4. But also we were like, a year and some change outside of pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And our church was closed for a long, long time. Long time. So that too, kind of the culture of the worship team had already started, like people sort of disappeared into the ether a little bit, and we were doing everything we could to safely pull people together. It was just an odd time. Yeah. Very odd time. But I do think I would have shortened it had I known that I wouldn't be able to find the person.
That's a tough thing, just like mentally to come to terms with is, hey, I'm going to do the best that I can on my end to set up a good transition.
Yeah.
I don't get to control whether or not I'm going to actually be able to complete that transition in some, smooth way.
Yeah.
And then being okay with whatever that outcome is, because you only can do so much, and you're ultimately not any more responsible for what happens at that church specifically, and so that's part of the letting go.
Yeah.
Do you think the church appreciated the length of time that you gave them as a heads up?
I think they did. Yeah. I hope so. That was my intent.
I would sure think, that's the thing. It's like, I think everybody does it with very good intentions, and because it can feel like that when you hear 2 weeks, you're like, oh my gosh, only 2 weeks, especially in church.
Yeah.
Maybe in other business that's quite normal, but it just feels like, oh my gosh, that's a really, really short period of time. And I would think, especially in that role where if you don't have another person who's your wingman next to you who could take over immediately, if you got hit by a bus day one, to be able to, help cover them and stuff like that. But
absolutely.
That's cool. Yeah. So from there, you basically stepped out. The whole contracting after leaving church too is a thing, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've like you're saying that, and I go, how many Sundays a year did I do that? And I still do too, but it's definitely less than what it was. But it does feel like this. I don't know what to do, so I guess I'll just go do the thing that I know how to do, which is go serve at a church on a Sunday morning.
And there's an identity. Yeah, there's an identity piece to that certainly, and there's a financial provision side of that. Yeah, and there's a bit of somebody wants me, right? If we're honest. So
everybody likes to be wanted.
It's fun.
It's
fun to go other places and experience new things and people and
I think it's I think when a lot of people who have those specialist type roles in ministry, I think I don't remember who I used to say this to, but there's only a handful of ministry roles in a church that are applicable outside of either the church that they're currently in to be able to go make money outside of that, whether you're a production person and you want to go freelance at a production company or a corporate, show, do whatever, or worship and to be able to go lead at other churches or play other music elsewhere. And it feels good to be wanted when
you can't be a contract youth pastor. Is that not a thing? Contract small group leader or
Man,
what?
Yeah, right.
I'm the best middle school guys, small group leader ever, and I just go around and churches hire me to.
Now they're just called influencers.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yeah, but I think about in that time too, I did so much of that, and I started seeing, whenever I was there leading somewhere, I wanted to connect with the leaders, connect with the volunteers, because I knew either they're in a season where they don't have somebody right now, and that's where culture can start leaking, right? Yeah. But then I started to kind of pick up on this trend that churches that were perpetually inviting in a hired gun, quote unquote, if you will, those cultures could quickly start to just leak. People weren't really knowing each other. It felt more like a gig than a family. And I think that's too where my heart started going, I miss really investing in a group of people, knowing them, knowing Eric's kids who are in college and Lisa's family and what they're going through. Yeah.
And I think in some of your contracting that you did post leaving full-time ministry, you were at a couple places for a longer period of time. That was like Cherry Hills. You were there for
7 months.
It's a long time.
I was at Foundations Church in Windsor, Colorado for 5 months. Yeah, I did
that's a very long time.
Yeah.
As the interim, kind of person. Do you feel like in those interim seasons were those in between them hiring a full-time person?
Yes.
And you were very specifically hey, I'm not here to take this job or to be this person for you forever.
Yes.
Here's X date that we're going to stop this at, or whatever, because that can be a tricky thing for a church to go, well, this is a great solution and we'll just try to do this forever now.
Absolutely. That happened a couple times. And it kind of felt like I would be invited for lunch with, the pastor, and it was like we were playing a game of chess. And I'm but I'll give you till October. But I loved those interim spaces because it also meant I could then invest in their team. Like I would send out a video every week or so with like a vision for the team. Hey, here's where we're headed as a church. Here's a little like nugget of spiritual reflection for you. I felt like I was able to pastor the team and kind of help them steady on until their next leader came.
Yeah, say more about that, because as you're describing that, those things that you were maybe doing in even an interim role, I can imagine there are some permanent worship pastors that aren't doing those kind of things.
Yeah.
Like, so speak more of that. Like, as you're thinking about your desired outcome, like I'm trying to move this team, grow this team, invest in this team, whatever that might be. What are the things that you're thinking of that, hey, these are the steps that I'm going to take, or these are the things that I need to provide to help bring the team together and move in the direction we need to go?
Yeah. For me, it's important. What I always do is put myself in the shoes of the volunteer who has limited access on Planning Center, so can't click around, see what else is happening.
A scheduled viewer only, as they call them.
And that is very limited. So I think about that kind of person. I think about the person who's been a part of the worship team for 5 years and has seen some ebbs and flows and is like, well, what's going to happen now? So I would take it to God in prayer too. Like, who are the people that I really need to have a touch point with on this team so that they know it's going to be okay? So I think thoughtfulness is what has helped me pastor people well throughout those interim seasons. And I think we as leaders, wherever we are, if we're full-time somewhere in production or programming or worship, we can do that. Just taking a pause and really prayerfully thinking through what might somebody want to know or what might help them feel seen and bring them back into the fold.
Yeah, because I think in all of those scenarios when you're stepping in as an interim, it's because somebody left and you're in there. The people that are left behind, the volunteers, whatever they are, the staff members, like they feel like, oh gosh, well, like here's a person that we have to now learn, get to know, hopefully build some really good culture with, and then they're going to leave, and then we're going to have to do it again in 6 months, 7 months, a year, or whatever that looks like. But I think it's
that's interesting. Would you speak to that specifically when you're in an interim role of the fact that there's sort of an expiration on this?
Yes.
Does that come up in the way you interact with the team?
Yeah. I think letting the team. So that's a really good point. Making sure the team isn't now reattaching to me as their leader, but I am like their person for a season, and I'm going to keep kindly reminding them of when I'm going to be wrapping up and what's in my jurisdiction to do in this season and what's not. That kind of helps keep pointing them towards I'm a temporary like landing spot here for the ministry.
And that can be tough too, because I imagine as a experienced worship leader, you see things in that ministry that you might want to do differently or want to take in a certain direction and have to say, okay, is that appropriate? Is that something I should be doing right now? And kind of figuring out those distinctions as you're going through. That's a tricky one.
100%. Yeah, like for one team that I was interiming at, it really served them well to have like vocal demos done and posted ahead of time. So we're going to put up the alto part and the tenor part. And I don't know if the person who has the full-time job, if they're doing that, but something like that, I was clear to say, like, I'm going to do this in this season. There's no guarantee but we will follow the leadership of the next person.
Yeah.
So point towards and kind of like support that next person, even though they're not.
We all sing melody all the time. It's fine. Like we support it. We're all on board. It's fine.
With one lady singing a harmony.
That's right.
That's all.
Always.
Everyone else, gang vocals. It's great.
Fun.
So through that season, you started to contract less.
Yeah.
And I remember, hearing some of these things as you were going through this, and it was a very large leap of faith of stepping out of full-time ministry where I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. Now it's, it's still regular, but it's in a different way. How was that I think for you? And then what did that lead into? Because now, you're doing a bunch of stuff with cohorts and a ton of women in creative ministries and stuff like that. And so just be interested, how did that get you to what you're doing right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like we never quite ever fully land. So I'm going to be so excited to see what does this journey look 5 years from now. Who knows? It was definitely a leap of faith because I'm one who loves safety, security. I want to know what's coming, what's steady, right? I gave up a full-time salary in 2021 and haven't had it for 4 years. And so a lot of that has been faith. And I am not a salesperson. Like I don't have a sales bone in my body. So I'm not going to be out there like trying to push forward anything that I think I will only talk about things that I think are actually truly going to be like beneficial. So God has continued to provide. You know, in the scriptures, it talks about how God provided manna, and the word manna, which Sarah Emerson spoke on this too. I forgot about that. But the word manna essentially means, what is this? Like, what is this? We don't even know, but it's provision. And I've seen that happen so many times where like the moments I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to work on my resume and just go into corporate America. And then boom, another contract drops on my lap. And I'm like, manna. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's what it's looked like. Definitely been a beautiful, healthy identity shift to be somebody who can just attend church, be a part of a beautiful church community. And then I lead one Sunday a month to give our worship pastor a break and then support her in the background a little bit. That's it. And then I've kind of organically come across a number of worship leaders who I'll support for a season. There was a great guy in Ventura, California, I coached for 6 months. And then there's an awesome creative arts director in Orlando, and there's a few worship leaders here and there. Awesome. So and I launched a pilot group last year, a female worship leading cohort, and it just got picked up for this coming year. So that's called Level Up Coaching for Female Creatives. So we're kind of broadening it to anybody in the creative church world who identifies as female. Come on, be a part of this cohort.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Was the first one creative as well, or was it specifically more towards like worship pastors and worship leaders?
Yeah. The first iteration was mostly worship leaders. Okay. And then once we got through the content, it's 5 months content, we got through it and went, oh, this is translatable to anybody in the creative arts. So female lighting directors, tech directors, whoever.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So,
maybe talk a little bit more about that. So you spend 5 months in this cohort. Like, what does that look like? What are the experiences like? What are sort of the rhythms of things that you guys would talk over?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we do one monthly call for 75 minutes altogether over Zoom. And then each leader has a one-on-one call each month too, where we really kind of take that month's content and take it into their context. So that's been really enjoyable because we get this group time and then we get to like really dive deep. Yeah. And then it ends with an in-person gathering for 2 days in Denver, which like Denver mountains, it's just, it was so fulfilling last time. Yeah. So we kind of talked through some different things like how do you build out a ministry framework? Like really dive into who's coming to your church? What do they need to hear? How do they need to best express to God? Then how do you identify our expectations as a ministry? How we need you to show up at rehearsal, et cetera. We look at how to be more proactive versus reactive in our work and quite honestly, just as humans as well, to set us up well so we're not victims to our life, but like we're the proactive ones leading the way. Yeah. So those are some of the topics where we dive into. Oh, and we have one of the months is on how do you speak band and production. So just the fundamentals of like, how do you speak to your lighting director? How do you speak to your drummer? Like just let's learn the basic lingo of each of those positions and resource them with that.
Yeah. I'm curious as you're having those conversations, like you probably have, I imagine, participants that are from a lot of different contexts and backgrounds, experiences, you know, geographically, like what are the threads that you kind of see, if there are threads that kind of are common struggles or challenges or questions that are arising in those different interactions?
Yeah, definitely the topic that felt like a deep dive was we talked about crucial conversations. And in that months of content, there was just this common thread where the leaders in there didn't know that they could push back on things. They felt like they had to be all things for all people and didn't know how to have the language to graciously give a clear no. So that was a very common one. And then truly, I hear a lot from my female leaders, like, I don't know how to speak drummer or bass, so I just don't. And that's where I want to say, well, let's get you feeling comfortable then.
Yeah.
Let's look at some videos. Let's learn learn what 4 on the floor is. Learn some of the different bass guitar tones so that you feel empowered when you're leading your team and you're not just like, I don't know, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
No, let's lean into it with that knowledge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Did the what's the or was there an average size of a church that most of these people were coming from, and maybe the one that you did, and then maybe what you're hoping to get, or is it just super broad and from all spectrums of size?
Yeah, I'd say the size of the churches were we had a few 200 person attendees, some church startups, some meeting in schools and doing setup tear down, and then we had a few 10,000 plus churches. So
crazy.
It really was a wide spectrum, but the content connected to each.
Yes.
It's like we're all on this journey at some level. And it was really cool. I think the most beautiful fruit was seeing this person from Florida connect with this person from Pittsburgh, connect with this person in Wisconsin, and go, oh, you all now are connected.
Absolutely.
You have a community now.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to Brian Abbey about his stuff that he was doing with youth pastors, the same, very similar cohort type stuff. And he was just describing ending with the in-person at the end, where now we've been together for 5 months.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I know you because we've had conversations and we've and now I get to actually meet and interact with you in person. Those are now friendships and connections that they will have for a long period of time. And
I get chills thinking about that because it's like, oh, we're not just faces on a Zoom screen. We are flesh and blood and bone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think back to the relationships that I've made over, my career. And I go, so many of those came from a random Zoom call where I met a person and then I ran into them at a conference or a trade show or something. And I'm like, oh, we should go grab dinner and learn more about your ministry. And now they're, either very good connections and friendships, or have helped me into other seats in ministry or other roles and stuff like that. And people like Tim Foote and Stan have popped up through people like that. And so it's just super cool. So I love the in-person thing. I think that's so fun.
Yeah,
because it's hard. It's it would be hard to only do it on Zoom. I think.
I think you lose a bit of that stickiness. Once you're able to fellowship, the second night of our cohort in person, we finished up dinner all together, long time over the table. And then we cleaned up in the kitchen. And then we said, hey, we should sing together since we're all here. And a few of us pressed record and sang the goodness of God in a cappella, awesome. 5-part harmony. It was just so gorgeous. And it's oh, yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we do this.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So coming from that one to the one that you're doing now, or getting ready to go do, what things would you do, or are you going to do differently, or the same, I guess, if any, as you kind of learn from that? And I think really we're just trying to figure out hey, what kind of market are we actually hitting with these female creatives and worship pastors to, now even broadening it wider, I think, as a overall just creative ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. The one thing I would change is we're broadening it out more, because we're seeing that these are translatable topics for all of these leaders. I wouldn't change much of the content. It actually felt like it stood on itself really well. So we're doing that. And I want these women to know that they are loved, they are not alone, they are supported, that they have people, they have a network now to go to. I love what Aubrey Wentz is doing with Philo. It's those types of groups where it's sometimes I'll just say, if I could show my cards, sometimes we as female leaders feel like we're an island and we don't know that there are others out there. And I've had this beautiful inside look with my work with Slingshot Group to say, oh my gosh, there's so many of us. So now let's know each other and resource one another.
Yeah. I think it's already such a niche thing to do it in a church in general, to do anything creative in a church.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I'm not a female, and so I can't speak to that, but I think I'm assuming that feels even smaller for them, right? And you think about that even in production, and the number of like female production leaders is significantly smaller than the number of male. And to bring them alongside and go, hey, like you're equally a part of everything that we're doing here. And you have, I know some incredible LDs who are females, Isabel Sanchez, you rock. People like that to come alongside and just go, hey, how can we, serve ministry in this way and do it with other people that are doing it in other seats around the country that you would have never known unless you met them for the first time on Zoom.
Yeah, 100%.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all of that, you were also doing a podcast at the time.
Yeah.
And all of that. And I love the tagline that you had on it, because it was such a funny little thing. But
it's a long one. Yeah. So I did 3 seasons and I might do more, but I'm trying to retool that content right now. But it's called Darling, Confessions of a Former Megachurch Singer, which I just think is like, yes, I felt so much like the darling, the sweetheart of the stage. So it was from that perspective, like be this image, be this thing, be a little darling. And it was my space to say, I want to talk about some things in a respectful but honest way. So that's what the podcast is.
Maybe give a couple examples of some of the topics that you deal with, because I think that, whether or not someone listening had that exact experience as you, I think there are probably some similar sort of, I feel like we should be talking about X, Y, and Z that people relate to.
Yeah. So I think one is when we look at the overall product of a Sunday morning experience, sometimes we go into topics going like, here's a dress code we have for everybody. Okay, well, what's behind that dress code? I will let you know, I confess that I left Willow with a handful of royal blue dresses that had been purchased for me to wear. So but nobody spoke into what was going on here, but I was a type that they wanted me to kind of be on stage, okay? But again, no conversation had happened with like, hey, we're trying to represent the suburban women out here, or the urban artist, or the whatever. Even though that was displayed, conversations never really happened. So I'll go into things like that. Like, how do you honor the people on stage and let them be who they are, but invite them into the vision of what we're trying to do here? I think it's looking at the relationship between production and worship creative, and saying, how can we truly be one team? And also, what do you do when there's a number of competing values that we're all trying to like fight to be the main one? So those are some of the topics we discussed on
very, very interesting conversations.
Yeah. I had Todd Elliott on, I think, number 2 or number 3 episode. I just love that man. And we got to work together for a long time. He's now running Philo. And
Todd is a man.
He is such a sweetheart and such a great leader. I loved his book.
Yeah.
I
Love Jesus, but I hate Christmas.
Yes.
It's very timely.
It's so timely,
Yeah. I think, go ahead. No, you go.
After you, sir.
I was just thinking about more of when the relationship between like the worship pastor and production in general.
Yeah.
And I think some of the people, whether they're in your cohort or other people that you're coaching, or leaders that you're, connecting with through Slingshot, like what's the percentage, or maybe you might not even have a number, but of those people that are not skilled in the lingo that has to happen to communicate really well, whether it's a staff member in the back of the room or it's volunteers, regardless, there's somebody back there like every time.
Yeah.
And I think that puts a lot of worship pastors in really like tough spots. Like I was joking earlier, I'm like, you're on the stage, like you're singing, you're leading a song, and you're at the mercy of whatever's happening in the back, whether it's affecting your in-ears or the lyrics on the screen or your instrument and everything that's happening in the PA. What has some of those like conversations I think been like when it comes to like whether it's coaching worship leaders to go, hey, here's some of the language that you should use with them. Because I also think it would be timely for the production people and the creative people that are listening to this to also go, hey, what questions do they need to ask to their worship pastor that they're not? Because it goes both ways. It's not just the worship pastor's job to communicate really well and be the leader, in those spaces, but
100%. A couple questions come to mind. I think one is, how does that make you feel? So I think about that from the perspective of, maybe my saying to an audio engineer, man, my mix sounds awful. And then having, right? And then having a retroactive meeting and saying, hey, Ron, how did that make you feel when I said that? And let's see each other as humans.
Like how you named Ron.
Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron. Do you all know the Ron I'm talking
of course.
about? I love Ron so much.
Yep.
But Ron, how does it make you feel when I say that? That takes humility. That takes and courage to be able to maybe hear something uncomfortable and awkward. But that's going to cause two people to come closer to each other because they hear and see each other. So that's one. And then I think another question is, hey, what do you mean by that? Or tell me more.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we think we need to already know the things and we're afraid to admit when we don't. What if we pause and said, I don't know that, here's a great example. When I was working in my startup church in Colorado, I had a audio engineer who was pushing for us to incorporate Dante. Okay. And I was like, look, Jeff, you need to explain to me who Dante is and why we need him. And he was so sweet. And I said it snarky because I was like, I know Dante is some dude that we need to purchase here and make happen. And Jeff was so awesome. And he just he wrote out a summary in the most basic fundamental terms through the lens of knowing. And I was like, we can laugh about this because I have no idea who Dante is, but I know that we need him and I know he's going to be expensive. And I'm the one to pull the trigger on it. So that kind of thing where it's can we just see each other as humans? Yeah. And just ask if we don't know and ask what's your lens? What's your perspective of this? What did that do to you when I said XYZ from stage? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think the theme that I've seen kind of throughout your description of the different, challenges and phases of your journey, it comes back to that crucial conversation piece of can you be someone who is okay stepping into something that's maybe uncomfortable and have the humility to ask a question about how, you're saying here, someone else's experience or how something could have been better, and come at it in a way that opens up those doors and doesn't sort of build barriers and create, tension. And the more you do it, the more trust you build, and the more, Jeff or Ron or whoever is on the other side of your conversation in this scenario, believes that, you have the best interest of the team at heart, and you're trying to learn together and grow together, and you're as willing to take feedback as give feedback.
100%. Yeah, that matters a lot. I think pride is a major killer to teams. So if we can just take ourselves a little bit less seriously and know that we don't have all the answers, that's going to make us a much more approachable and enjoyable team member.
Yeah, I think of all of even just the misunderstanding of lingo, of me hearing a worship pastor talk on, during a rehearsal, I'm going, hey, my ears sound like blank. Whatever odd word that they use that I would never use to describe something. And asking the question, can you explain that? What's another way you could describe that? Because I'm hearing something and what you're describing is not accurate or can help me in any way, shape, or form of just saying I don't even know what. Yeah. What word.
I always just say more about that.
Say more.
Say more about that.
Tell me more.
Oh, that's interesting. Say more about that.
Yes.
And if they don't say enough, you just say, oh, that's cool. Yeah. Say more, and just keep going until you start to at least have a direction. Yeah.
Because if you assume, if I would assume that my worship pastor knew the correct language to use, it's going to make things not great when they don't use that language and they just start saying weird, my mix is honky, my whatever this thing is, and the reality is, or there's so much room mic in my my ears, and I look at their mix and I'm like, there's no room, there's no rooms in there, man. There's no rooms. Your vocal is pegged at 11, and there's a lot of things that they're hearing because of that. But I think using common language and using a way to describe things, I think helps so many situations when they get complicated and messy.
Yeah, and we have to just take the time to do that. Like that takes time. And I know ministry is always busy, and there's the tyranny of the urgent. Like the urgent matter will always take precedence over the really important thing that has no deadline to it. So to take that time and carve out and say, let's, as a teamwork, even if we make like a Google Doc of just all the basic terms that we're going to utilize as a church, just think of like the time and the headaches that's going to save for years to come. The team.
Well, and that goes not just even to production, but like, hey, band members, when I say this is what that means. And let's all remember when we say this word or when I describe something like this is what we're looking for, because this is the vision of kind of who we are in a, as blank piece of paper as we can.
Yes. Yeah. Like in music, if they might say, we're going to just hit on the one. Okay. The one chords, or they're going to say, we're going to hit whole notes here. Or some people say, we're going to hit footballs. Okay, because it's like a whole note. We're going to hit footballs. Or I used to say, like, we're just going to wash out. And my husband would laugh at me. He's like, wash out. Let's wash out. He's a bass player. He's like, I'll wash out for you. Yeah. So it's like, get those terms kind of figured out for your teams. Yeah.
Gosh, cool. I love that.
To zoom out, kind of more 30,000 foot, what you're doing now with those cohorts or through Slingshot and things like that, you get to experience a lot of different church contexts, a lot of different, backgrounds and geographies and things like that as well. You mentioned that you are supporting different worship leaders around the country even. Yeah. So I'm curious, for the people that are listening, that are all in some way responsible for some aspect of their gatherings, whatever their role, there's something that they're tasked with, and thinking about how to shape aspects of what it's like when people come together, usually on a Sunday, to do this thing. So I'm just curious, as you're interacting with these different leaders in these different contexts, like what are the things that you see them wrestling with or thinking about in their context of responsibility? As they think about the services that they're entrusted with and the gatherings that they're stewarding, like what are some of the things that they're just thinking through or wrestling or new things that they're trying that, might be edifying to the people that are in a similar boat?
Yeah. Well, I think different types of churches, they have different types of playgrounds, right, that they can play within. Their fences look different. Some of them, so I've been sitting in some more progressive spaces where you might see it's really common to infuse some scriptures or like a reading, and what you're building out is more of like a modern liturgy. So it's looking at the whole thing and going, okay, what's the journey we can take people on through song, readings, breath prayers, these types of things. I've been in some spaces where they want to integrate some sort of a practice-based format into their services. So it's maybe an 18-minute talk and then a practice into a guided meditation or something like that. So there's some of those things that leaders are looking at and going, okay, what feels right for our context? And then there's spaces too where kind of from the megachurch type spaces where it's more like we have our structure, we have our framing, we have our format. How do we make this feel fresh? It just feels like it's the same thing every single stinking week. How do we infuse Holy Spirit life into that? How do we take the prism of our service where we're seeing like a couple colors and then we just turn it ever so slightly? So we're looking at the gospel, we're looking at everything like through a new vibrant colors. I think those are some of the things I'm seeing people wrestle with. How do we make something not feel tired anymore? And then what really is going to work well within our context? Yeah.
Do you feel like those questions are daunting for a lot of the people that you engage with? Because like you had said a minute ago, we have our structure, we have our thing that we do. Yeah. That can be hard to kind of picture something different. Anytime you have some sort of like an ingrained pattern, it just becomes natural. What would you say to people that are trying to just take a step to break out of that thing? And I don't know, just a thought process on how to try something different or have a conversation with their team around trying something different and maybe even just poking at those possibilities.
Yeah. So I actually did a podcast with Darling, with lead pastor Matt Hessel from LifeBridge Christian Church. And we talked about kind of that relationship between the worship team and lead pastor. So in that, when a leader is thinking through like, let's try something new or what can we try? certainly if you are able to, have a conversation with your lead pastor or your campus pastor and invite them into the conversation. Here's what I'm thinking. Here are the benefits I could see from it. Here are some of the challenges or what could go awry. Just simply inviting them into that, again, is kind of creating that mutual space of trust to say, I'm coming to you vulnerably saying I want to try something new, but I know that you have voice into this. So I would start there, certainly for leaders who are wanting to push the button a little bit and try.
But I think when they're able to scratch that itch, whether it's through something that's creative. I love the metaphor of the prism. I think that's so good because it doesn't take that much to turn it and see this now vibrant, group of colors that you were only seeing one or two before. And it's not like, I think people think when they look at their planning center for the next 6 weeks, I have to flip this upside down and shake it 6 times to make sure that, we come up with something different. And it doesn't always take that. And whether it's, incorporating liturgy or scripture reading or something else through that, I think is huge. And so, I mean, I think as people are listening to this and hearing, some of the things we're talking about through crucial conversations, the things that you're doing in the creative space with women in ministry and stuff like that, if they want to connect with you and or to even join this cohort that's going to be coming up, how would they do that? Where can they find you? Where can they sign up and at least start that process?
I would love to connect with anybody, even if it's just I'm interested in these conversations. Go to BeckyYkema.com. I have a crazy last name. I understand that, so I'll spell that for you. So it's Becky, Becky, and then another Y, KEM like mother, A.com. And I'm also on Instagram a lot.
That's great.
Yeah. Man,
well, I'm excited for that, and I'm so excited to see how that cohort continues to grow.
Thanks,
and
appreciate it.
I'll be following along, and I love seeing your. I can't remember when you were at your in-person thing, if you were went up in the mountains or something.
Yeah,
like
we
that.
did.
But you were somewhere. I was
oh,
that looks great. That's so cool. So I'm excited for that. And
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out and joining us, and hope that you have safe travels back tonight, back home.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, until next time, see y'all later.